Hello and welcome to episode 14 of What Makes This Song Special. We're going to dive straight in today. A quick reminder of what the show is about. I basically tell a story about what a certain song makes me think about in my life, a wee story from my past. I then talk a wee bit about the song and a little bit about the singer, a sort of vocal coach reaction to some of the singer's technique. And then I follow up with a part two of my own cover version of the song. So this week's song is going to be Torn by Natalie Imbruglia, and I will start with the story. So what does it make me think of? So this one takes me right back to probably the latter years of high school, and mainly just after I left high school. So the summer that I'd left, I had no idea what I was going to do with my life, trying to become a rock star or whatever. I think I spoke about this in a previous episode. So a bit of a limbo period, and I wanted to go down the route of playing in bands and doing like mini tours and waiting for somebody to come along and say, wow, you guys are the next big thing, and sign us up, which would have been awesome. But some of my friends at the time had signed me up for an audition for it was a sort of X Factor type program. I don't think it was X Factor. I really don't remember exactly what it was. It was probably just before X Factor or Pop Idols became a thing. I think that started maybe just after I left school, early 2000s. But yeah, well, one of those types of program, and I really wasn't even aware that TV talent contests for singers existed. I think this was maybe just the advent of that. And I think my friends at the time who'd signed me up, they knew I wouldn't go through with it. So what they did was they waited till about 2 nights before the audition was to take place. And then told me, when we were around at somebody's house one night, they all kind of gathered around me and they said, right, we've got a surprise for you. We've sent away a song of yours to Channel 4. I think it was Channel 4. And they've called you in for an audition to this programme. And of course, I immediately was... it's just not the route that I wanted to go down. And that's not disrespect to anybody who has gone down that route or wants to audition for X Factor, The Voice, that type of thing. I know it's become a massive thing. And I've certainly trained many singers. I've even taught 2 or 3 singers who have been on The Voice and X Factor and done pretty well in it. So I'm not going to slag off any of those programmes. I just, at the time, it wasn't the direction I wanted to go in. I was wanting to go down, as I said, the more sort of rock star route, the old school, get a band and go on tour. So as well as that, I just, at 17 years old, that the thought of doing a television programme like that, even now, many years later, still terrifies me. So I was terrified by it. I just didn't really want to do it. The anxiety was already rising in me as soon as they told me that they'd sent stuff away and there was an audition looming in 48 hours. So yeah, I argued, I refused, and then I also felt really guilty because they'd all gone to this effort and they were all excited for me. And it was nice that they all believed in me, I suppose, and thought, well, I was good enough to do something like this, and went behind my back to audition for me, or to apply for me for an audition. So what followed for me was sort of 48 hours of fear, panic attacks, no sleep, thinking about, and this is where it gets strange, because I think most people think they worry most about failure. For me, that was never really the case. I don't mean that in a big-headed way. It wasn't so much the failure that worried me. I think failure's just failure's a horrible word. Rejection, a little bit of rejection. I wasn't really scared of that. That's kind of something you have to get used to in the world of performing arts. You have to get used to people saying, you're not the right fit, you're not good enough, whatever. My biggest fear, and the reason I couldn't sleep, was really more about what happened if I succeeded. Failure would have meant that I could go back to my kind of cosy little bedroom at my mum and dad's house and keep dreaming of something else. Success meant that my life would have to change, and my control and my own future would be compromised, and that's what always terrified me. And that's always kind of what terrified me about fame in general. It's probably one of the things that really held me back from ever pushing for becoming a famous singer in the first place. I kind of really, every time anything almost happened, and we'll talk about some of those stories maybe in future episodes, I chickened out every time. So anyway, I couldn't sleep for worrying about the judges loving me and thinking that I was the next big thing, and everyone around me putting pressure on me to be something that I wasn't really ready for and didn't really know if I even wanted. And that's a tricky one. People always think that if you're lucky enough to have a gift, like, again, sounds big-headed, a gift, but a gift like a musical gift or artistic ability or physical attributes that make you a perfect person for sport or whatever, people think you're so lucky. But I think a lot of these things can be a real curse if your head's not in the right place for it, and my head's never been right in general. So it wasn't the right time. It wasn't really the right path, but I felt like I owed it to the friends who had, as I say, applied for this for me as a surprise. So I plucked up the courage. The audition was in a Glasgow nightclub called Archaeos, which I don't think exists anymore, but it was a bit of a classic. In my younger days, that era, we had Archaeos was quite an established club for young people to go to. It was a pretty cool place. And I'd been a couple of times at night by this point, but never during the day, and of course never for an audition for a TV show. So a surreal experience. And I chose to sing One More Try by George Michael, which I did a version of on the channel a few weeks ago, and you can head there. I don't know if I'll maybe leave a wee link or something, but you can head there and have a listen to that if you like. So yeah, a couple of girls that I was friends with at school at the time had given me a lift and dropped me on Queen Street outside the club, and I told them I'd call them when I was out for my lift home. I didn't want anyone with me. I just wanted to go in alone, get it over with, and hopefully not succeed. It's just, again, very strange thing to say, but the waiting to be called was this kind of blur. There were people with guitars and bizarre outfits all trying to stand out, and I remember thinking that I should have taken an instrument. I immediately regretted not taking an instrument. I could have taken a guitar, my keyboard, and thought that would have really showed off my skills more than just standing singing to a backing track. But then again, that whole dilemma of I didn't really want to get through the audition anyway, so I didn't really know if that would have been allowed, so I hadn't taken anything with me. I was quite underprepared with my one backing track and just wanted it to be over, as I said. So as I was in the queue and looking around at all these people and knowing that I was about to be called maybe 10-15 minutes later, I decided to go to the bathroom to perform my then usual pre-performance ritual of throwing up, vomiting in the bathroom to sort of settle my stomach. This was just something that I always had to do for the first few years of me performing as a singer. I could never handle the anxiety of it. So especially on this day, because it was kind of even worse than just singing at a gig. It was a whole, judges watching and all that kind of stuff, goldfish bowl. So yeah, threw up in the bathrooms, and I came out of the bathroom and kind of got lost trying to find my way back to the queue. And there was this girl sitting on the floor with a kind of old beaten up acoustic guitar, and she was singing Torn by Natalie Imbruglia, and there was this echo in the corridor that made her sound like an angel. Just an amazing voice. And I just stood there in the corridor and watched her practice for a couple of minutes. She was just like practicing the song, and at that point the song reminded me of high school. It had maybe come out 2 years before, and it reminded me of like fun times at school and groups of people that we were friends with at school, and just how much more easy life had seemed at school when you didn't have to worry about what you were going to do with your life and what university course you were going to do and what job you were going to do and all these things. And it sort of made me think about how much fun we had at school in 5th and 6th year, the sort of last 2 years in in the UK, 5th and 6th year, the last 2 years in the UK, before you head off to sort of further education. So she was amazing, this girl. She had such an amazing voice. I can still remember exactly what she sounded like today. And it made me strangely sort of relieved, because I was immediately aware that there were other good singers there. Something that I hadn't even really thought of. I don't know if that was just my ego thinking I was going to be so good. And I thought, oh, maybe there's a lot of good singers like her, and maybe I won't be picked. And that kind of made me quite excited, because again, the fear for me was the thought of being chosen, and then having the dilemma of saying, oh God, I don't want to go and do this show, and having everybody tell me I was crazy for rejecting it. So these were all the things that were going on in my head. Bizarre, but yeah. So eventually they came and they called me into the room, and there were 3 judges at the table with pens and paper. It was a kind of dark room, and again I was looking around the room thinking, oh, this is exactly where like you dance when you come here, when it's a club at night. And but there was a really great echo, and I remember just closing my eyes and taking a deep breath and belting out One More Try. And I remember thinking as I was singing it that I was absolutely nailing it. I was smashing it. I just nailed every note. It was one of those performances where I was like, wow, I'm doing well here. And the echo helped, and just it sounded big, and it just echoed around the nightclub. And there was a strange sort of oxymoronic nature to it, because I wanted to blow them away. I wanted them to be like, this guy's the greatest singer we've ever heard, but at the same time I didn't want them to pick me for the show. And actually exactly what I hoped for happened. After all the worrying and anxiety, they said that they thought I had an awesome voice. Their words, not mine. But they were looking for more of a sort of boy band type singer, and not another George Michael, which I didn't know if that was a bit of a I don't know if they were kind of slagging me off for trying to sound like George Michael or whatever, I'm not sure, but they said we're not really looking for another George Michael. And there was this huge sigh of relief inside me, as well as this wee stab of rejection, which you can't help, but you wonder why didn't they pick me, you know? So I walked out past the girl who'd been singing Torn, and she was actually just in the queue after me, and I wished her luck. And I walked out into Queen Street and breathed in the Glasgow air, and the relief was like shedding like this huge rucksack of bricks that I'd been carrying for like the last 2 days. And I remember just phoning the girls that were picking me up to come and give me a lift, and then just in my head thinking about Natalie Imbruglia Torn and just singing that song in my head. So there's my wee story. That's what that song always takes me back to. It always reminds me of the fear of that day. Something that would be, I think, you know, anxiety provoking for anybody, but for me it was just like a different level of ridiculous that I got myself into emotionally and mentally. So not good, but it always reminds me of the day. It was I'm glad I did it. It's a story that I'm now telling, and yeah, that's what it reminds me of. So we'll move on to Natalie Imbruglia. She wasn't the first person to sing Torn. It was actually a cover version. A lot of people thought she wrote the song, but and I'll discuss Natalie though, because it's her version that I'm sort of paying homage to in the episode. But it was actually written in 1993, so about 4 years I think before Natalie Imbruglia released it, and it was written by Scott Cutler and Anne Previn, and along with a producer called Phil Thornley. And it was a solo song for Anne Previn, who was a kind of American singer-songwriter at the time, who I don't think she made any kind of massive mainstream success, but I think maybe quite a kind of underground artist. But there was a Danish version of it that came out, a Norwegian version, and then in 1997 Natalie Imbruglia released her version, and it became a worldwide hit, the sort of version that we all know and love. It's a great melody, and I think the sort of fragility of her vocal side, that her vocal style, sort of that sweet sound that she has, really works for the lyric. The lyric's about someone being dumped essentially, and then the person wants them back and it's too late. they've sort of seen through the person by this point and the game's over. So nice wee lyric. I think it's a great track. I think it's a really good pop track. So Natalie Imbruglia, she was born and grew up in Australia, but is actually, like me, half Italian on her father's side and a mixture of Scottish, English and Irish on her mother's side. So useless fact, but there we go. Something in common with myself. Her vocal style is very interesting. I wouldn't say that she's got a particularly powerful voice in terms of volume, but it's powerful in the respect that it's emotive, and that's something that I have to remind my students of quite often when they talk about wanting to have more power in their voice. Obviously a great attribute for any vocalist, but you can make your voice powerful without it being necessarily loud. I think that's something that people get confused with. They think of powerful as always being loud. You can just have a voice that cuts through in certain frequencies and creates a sound that hits people in the feels, as they say. I hate that term, but but she's quite a sweet voice with a little bit of a kind of high laryngeal sound, meaning it can thin out a little bit as she gets higher in her range. But yeah, a really sweet, really emotive voice, and I think it works perfectly for this song. I think it's really good for the song. She was actually on TV recently on The Masked Singer, a programme I don't really watch, but my kids have started watching The Masked Singer, and it's quite fun watching them try and guess who it will be, even though they don't know any celebrities, so they're just guessing at nothing. But it's fun watching them if I'm not playing gigs on Saturday nights and things like that. So and she was on, I think she won it actually, The Masked Singer, dressed as something bizarre, I can't remember, but her voice was still great. She still had a lovely voice, so thumbs up for Natalie, well done. So this is my wee story. When I hear Torn by Natalie Imbruglia, I always think of like my last couple of years at high school, the excitement of becoming a sort of older teenager, and the excitement of just going out with friends, and my first experiences of going to clubs and all these things. But it always takes me back to that day, the audition, and the girl with the beautiful voice in Our Chaos. I don't know if she ever made it or became a famous singer or even a singer just professionally, but she had a wonderful voice. It always reminds me of her voice and her version of the song. So speaking of versions of the song, if you want to hear my version of the song, you can click here any second, or maybe there. I can never remember which side it comes up on. But have a click, listen to my wee cover of Natalie Imbruglia Torn. And as always, please like, share, subscribe if you haven't already. If you're looking for vocal coaching, wherever you may be in the world, we can jump on Zoom, we can jump onto Skype, FaceTime, various other technological mediums that we can jump onto, and I can work with you vocally, as I do with many people all over the world on a daily basis. So yeah, there's all my wee adverts and my wee tags and things. So thanks so much for watching. I'll see you next week.